Thank you. Certification compliance open meeting laws.
This meeting has been noticed to the public and news media as required by section 19.84 of the Wisconsin statutes.
Thank you. The agenda is set. Number 6, public comments. Is there anybody online? Linda, you have anything? Number 7, approval of the minutes of the previous meeting of August 10th.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Duffy, second by Mr. Regenheimer to approve. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Number 8, Finance Department reports. A, sales tax distribution. Mr. Markman.
If you're looking at the chart that I just told you, keeping that up close to $3 million.
Mike, will you turn your mic on, please? Thank you.
I need a teacher voice, then I wouldn't need all this. You want me to repeat it? Okay. Any questions on sales tax?
How's your prediction for the end of the year?
It's at 2.96 right now. Don't see any reason why we won't hit that. We continue to really hit the targets of what the projections are showing. So we've been right around 3 million all year since the first month.
Thank you. Questions?
2.875, I believe. 857. Moving on to the budget, we're 2/3 of the way through the year as of August 30th. The revenues, which we'll see in the charts, net of the planned fund balance draw are 67%. So we're right on revenues. Expenses, net of the transfer to HHS are at 60%. So we're running well on expenses too. HHS did have some larger contracted expenses in August, so they actually are showing a little bit of a deficit now, which again, I'm not too concerned about because they have several grants that come throughout the year and usually a little after the fact. So we should be in good shape, and highway still running at a surplus. That could change once we hit winter cleanup again, but so far so good. Looking at the actual numbers, you're going to see that on the revenue side, it looks like 60%. Again, that's net of the fund balance transfer, which we didn't have to do last year, hoping we don't have to do again this year. The other thing that's not going to happen is that transfer from debt service fund. That was if we had levied for insurance, which we did talk about doing for property casualty. We will not need to do that, aren't going to do it because we already issued the debt. But with interest income being strong, we didn't need to do that either. So I'd help you if I could. Those are the upper ones. The light coming down.
It's blind.
Yeah. On the expense or on the revenue side for all the other departments are right at 60% too. Anticipating we'll be okay at the end of the year. Ambulance probably will be a little under. But other than that, I think we're going to be all right. On the expense side, we're showing 55%. But again, that's including that big transfer to HHS, which I don't anticipate having to do. Hopefully we don't have to do, at least not all of it. So we're in really good shape there. And as I mentioned, net of those two, we're right at pace on revenue and running a little under in expenses. So we're in good shape. Human services, their revenues are lagging a little, which is not uncommon again, because they're so grant driven. Those come after the fact oftentimes, and expenses are running a little under. Highway department is in really good shape. They're in July, they got a big check from the state. So they're still, doing well on revenues because of that, and the overall is good. Expenses are running a little under, so their net income is just over 400,000 right now.
Wait a minute, please. Highway Department.
Yep.
Winter maintenance is in rough shape.
Yeah, I think we can handle one more storm before year end, before that portion of the budget is over.
Yeah, it's not gonna show up in
Yeah.
In the overall.
You're right.
we're within budget right now, so.
Yeah.
If it doesn't snow.
That
this
item
year,
I didn't know.
Stay with it.
No.
Both the airport and the courthouse maintenance and the highway department, all are at budget. There's no new discussion.
Mhm.
The rest of the year.
Thank you.
That was a big adjustment for the 2024 budget, is snow removal out at the airport.
Yes.
That chunk of money that went to highway, what was that designated for? What,
Was it double S or S?
Yes. Oh, yes.
okay, so it's, did we get from the state what we expected to receive from the state?
That I don't know.
Are you asking about the check from the state?
Yes.
Okay, most likely just a portion of our road aids from state maintenance. We get paid by the state to maintain.
Yeah,
State highway, I'm certain that's what that money would be about this time of year.
I was just, do we tell them how much we, obviously tell them how much we've done,
Right.
and then they set the amounts that we will be paid.
It is, it's, well, they set the equipment rates, and we report to them our wage costs for the hours that we put into the state highways.
And then we get 100% of that back.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was wondering. Thank you.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Mike.
Um,
Thank you.
capital improvement plan update, there were no purchases in August. So then moving on. I do not have the treasurer's report. That looks like it's included though. And Janine's on. Yeah.
Yes, I have that information. So I'll highlight a few of the items on the treasurer's report. On August 10th, Sawyer County acquired 17 properties from the 2018 in-rem process. The 90-day preference to previous owners was mailed following that court hearing. Tax certificates for the 2022 tax roll issued, and notice of issuance were mailed for the delinquent taxes. I also want to point out there has been an increase, as you can see, for credit card, debit card, electronic check payments that Sawyer County has received for delinquent and second installment payments. The chart below basically shows January to August for 21, 22, and 23. So I think, continuing to educate the public on the website and on the fact that we do accept online payments is helping. There is a note down there at the bottom. Taxpayers are charged a convenience fee, but that is at the responsibility of the taxpayer. So Sawyer County does not pay any of those fees. And then Lynn, if you want to flip to page 2, this is an outline of the process relating to the sale of county land acquired by tax foreclosure. And it provides a recap of Act 216 and how that affects the parcels that Sawyer County has acquired. Does anyone have any questions regarding this process?
Jadine, can you go down the list for us, please?
Sure. So basically, Sawyer County takes back property that is 5 years delinquent in real estate taxes. According to state statutes, 3 years is what is the required amount of time. The zoning department and land records and the treasurer's office, we meet basically to determine an appraised value of these parcels that Sawyer County acquires. And we have conversations regarding the land itself to determine that appraised value. And then that appraised value is presented to the Land Water Committee for review and approval. Once there's an approved amount, the parcel list and the values of the parcels are published as a Class 3 notice. The notice of a sale is mailed to the municipal clerks for which the real estate is located. And then in the meantime, we're compiling and submitting information for the online auction. The auction information is posted on the Sawyer County website. The auction generally runs 3 to 4 weeks in length. There's no cost to Sawyer County for the online auction service. At the conclusion of the auction, the bids that Sawyer County receives are then provided to the Land Water Committee for review. So any bid that comes in that's less than that amount that was previously approved is presented, and then the committee has the ability to either approve or reject those bids. If they reject them, they can also decide to change the minimum amount for upcoming auctions. They just have to make the motion, and then we have to post a Class 1 notice to offer that property for sale again. And then the bottom portion there basically outlines Act 216. So in the following pages, there's worksheets indicating the property that Sawyer County currently owns. Property that was acquired prior to April 2nd of 2022. So basically property we took back our 2015 and 2016 in REM. Those don't fall under the Act 216. Property that we acquired after April 2nd of 2022. So those would be our in-rems from 2017 and 2018. They have to abide by Act 216. So I guess in a nutshell, Sawyer County is now acting as a real estate agent to sell these properties because the former owner, as noted here, can receive the net proceeds from the sale of the property, where previously that wasn't necessarily the case.
Question.
Go
So
ahead.
when the county takes property back and we sell at auction, that money that we receive for the auction goes to the previous owner.
Well, that's where, like I said, the in-rem parcel, so property that we acquired prior to April 2nd of 2022, Sawyer County retains that.
Right.
After any property acquired after that April 2nd of 2022, so that would be our 2017 and 2018 in-rem properties, they now have to follow this Act 216.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, jump in on some of this.
Yes.
So Act 216, Janine, that has a time frame of, is it 7 years, if I remember right?
Well,
We
Yeah,
take them at 5, but
we take them at 5, and then the bullet point on the bottom, the former owner forfeits the right to any net proceeds if the county cannot locate that owner in 5 years.
and that's 5 years from when we take the property?
I want to confirm because I've heard 5 and I've heard 7.
Yeah, and I guess I was just going to point out, so there are some counties taking the approach that they're just going to hold those properties until that time frame runs out. And
Correct.
then they don't have to return those excess proceeds to the prior property owner. Janine, do you want me to kind of jump in on some of the issues from regarding the tribal taxation issue?
Absolutely, unless you want to, go through these, the properties that we have, that would probably help too.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and go through those and then we'll talk about that at the end.
Okay. So Lynn just pulled up. So basically, here's a list of our 2018 properties that we just acquired on August 10th of 2023. On this, note that there's a lot of columns blank, and the reason for that is because our 2018 parcels were still currently in that 90-day preference to previous owner period, where a property owner still could come back and complete an application to present to the Land Water Committee. If they pay those 5 years, they have to pay all the fees, the 5 years delinquent taxes, they can regain ownership of that property. So these parcels from 2018 have not, minimum bids have not been determined on these. That's why the columns on this sheet are blank. So then, Lynn, if you want to go to the next page. So 2017, we acquired these ones in August 3rd of 2022. So here you can find the actual parcel. And unfortunately, this is a PDF, so I was unable, but each of these tax numbers in the Excel spreadsheet that I have links right to Novus. So you could click on that to gain the information about the parcel and get mapping information. So if anyone's interested in that, I'd be happy to email you the spreadsheet. But basically, you can see the amount that was already approved by the Land Water Committee. It shows the date the property was acquired, and then that far right column gives the total expenses that Sawyer County has incurred. Each of these sheets are broken down by the Northwoods Beach subdivision and then non-Northwoods Beach. So there's a little summary that shows the total numbers of parcels that we acquired that year, the breakdown between non-Northwoods Beach and then the Northwoods Beach, and then the totals. And same thing then for 16 and for 15. So Andy, if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. But Andy, if you want to update regarding the meeting, that would be fantastic.
So,
Yeah, my God.
so we've had, well, as we've talked about, there was an appeals court decision in 2022 that essentially said that any tribal owned or tribal member owned land within the reservation is not taxable. There were parcels that were being taxed if they had been tribal within the reservation, tribally owned, then were not tribal owned, and then when they came back, they were being put on, or tribal members bought them back. They were being taxed. Once they lost that tax exempt status, they were not retaining that. Appeals court decision says they are not to be on the tax rolls. They are not to be taxed. So we know within this list that Janine has gone through with you, we've been notified from just a couple of property owners that are tribal members that they shouldn't have been taxed, and so they want relief. They want their property back. Based on the appeals court decision and discussing this with WCA and a couple of the other counties, we're tending to concur with that. I mean, there were some property owners that just paid their tax and they'll retain their property, but the ones that maybe there was a tax delinquency on should be returned to the property owner. Potentially, you could disagree with that, and the tribe will disagree with us, and there will be attorneys involved. And when you look at the properties in question and how much the tax liability actually is, it would only take a few hours of lawyer time to eat up that cost anyway. That's, from a risk management standpoint, it probably just makes sense to go ahead and return them. We had a meeting last night with some of the LCO representation, and this is one of the items we talked about. We did ask them, and we had already previously given them the list of, so just to say, Janine has taken these properties last year. sale was going to go ahead this summer. This issue came up, stopped the sale because we didn't want to go ahead and sell a property and then have to go through the process of getting it back. So we did give them the list of these properties. They will identify any tribal members that are listed so that we can remove those properties and go through the process of returning them to the prior owner. At least, we'll bring that back. There'll be a motion for you to, well, either you or the land water committee is in charge of tax deed properties to do that. The second part of our conversation with LCO representation is that they have an interest in, and maybe I'll just give you a visual since we have one we can show you. I'm gonna steal the screen. They have an interest in acquiring land back within the reservation. So, and I'll just focus in on the Northwoods Beach area. We'll find out, not all these properties are going to be formerly owned by tribal members. So the number of the properties that Janine has in the list are in this Northwoods Beach area and are within the reservation boundaries. So they've requested us to consider or look into an MOU or a right of first refusal so that before these would be sold on the tax deed process, that they would have an opportunity to buy them.
This is property owned by.
What's in red, those little parcels, we have a map now that has all the county-owned parcels. We can separate out.
County owned land that they would like to have first right on.
Yep, and that were taken by tax deed. So
Okay.
they were tax delinquent. We've acquired them. They're sitting on our ownership until we go ahead and make the
What's the
sale.
get?
Well, that's what we have to look into. I mean, there's a few questions there. One is, why would we want to do that?
Right.
And I guess that's their request. That's part of the why. The next question is, legally, can we do that? Because my concern is with Act 216 that was passed, like Janine says, we're essentially acting as a realtor, and the prior property owner that we've taken the property from retains some financial interest in making sure that any amount above the tax certificate and our expenses is returned to them. So how do we determine that? Usually you determine market value by going through the bid process or auction process to get to the market price. So we have to look into that and then bring that back and say, do you want to do this? And if you do, or determine if we can even do that or how we can do that.
So, I mean, I think I know the answer, but just so it's clear, so this is in essence property that the county owns. They want first right of refusal. But currently, I guess we're not getting any tax dollars now. But if we sold it to a non-tribe, we would get tax. We
Right.
sell it to them, we don't get tax.
Right.
Okay.
Yep. So that's, I guess I had spoke to them in regards to the taxation issue, and they brought this up, and then we heard more details about it last night as far as what they're interested in. So that's the second part. And then I guess the third thing I want to mention, this really isn't going to involve us as much, but there is probably going to be some issues between the townships and the LCO regarding a few properties. So if you look, and this map isn't real good, but the green line is the tribal boundaries. And so there's kind of a rough outline around an exterior, but within the tribal boundaries, there are pieces that are not considered reservation. And we already have at least one property that's come up that is going to be put on the tax rolls. The township has indicated it's going on the tax rolls, even though it's not considered reservation, but it's within the interior. So that's really not, that's between it ends up coming to us probably through the tax lister, but it's going to start at the town level with the assessor putting it on the rolls. That's where the properties like LCO has given the towns a list of tribal properties that need to be removed. But the towns are saying if it's not considered reservation, they're going to put it on the rolls. It's not already. So there's that issue to work through. But as soon as we have the list back of which tax deed properties are tribal member owned, we can remove those, and then Janine can proceed with the sale then.
I have a naive question. So it's on the tax roll, it then goes to tribe, it's off the tax roll. So this is the naive question. So in theory, when it's on the tax roll, those residents are getting services from the county, in theory. They're paying taxes, they're getting,
Regardless if it's on or off the roll, they're getting.
but that's my point. So it goes back on, not the tax roll, though they're still getting the same services, but it's just not paying taxes, and that's just the way the state wants it. Okay, thank you. Is that a federal or state requirement? Federal, I guess, right?
Well, I mean, the establishment of the reservation is federal.
Enforced by the state or enforced by the federal then? This tax roll issue?
It's actual issues. Well, it's a federal appeals court decision.
Forcing the state to,
Right.
okay, thank you.
I mean, the state is the one who, I believe the LCO and the other tribes involved brought the lawsuit that it was against the state. The state acted on behalf of the towns. and
Towns.
counties.
Thank you.
The state did not appeal this, when they appealed the decisions. The state didn't take it in that much.
Yeah.
That's all there.
They did, okay.
Questions for him? Questions for JD? You have more you want to add, JD?
I don't know.
I asked JD to put all this together, and I think she did a wonderful job. She went through a lot of different things, and we then narrowed it down to this. But I know she spent a lot of extra time in it, and I thank you for that, JD.
My pleasure.
The exercise too, we just didn't look at, we've been looking at this issue. So now we have kind of a list of all the tax deed properties. Well, we've had that. We also had the tax listing office and GIS put together a list of all the county owned properties in the county. We excluded county forest land and some others that we knew about, but now we have, I mean, there's a lot of parcels out there. You can see all the red outlines. This is all county owned property. The airport's on there, but there is a handful of parcels out there that might need to be clarified that they are part of the county forest. But there's also looks to be some excess county property that's out there that we'll focus on tax deed first, but then we're going to go back and try to understand why do we own this 40 out in the middle of nowhere and do we need it, and try to address that.
So it was a good exercise.
Interesting.
Okay. Number 10, investment review update.
Wait for her to pull it up here. All right, so if you look at the very first section, you're going to notice an addition, and that is the note proceeds. That's the good faith down payment on the $4 million note issue. We have since received all of the funds net of the state trust fund loan that we had issued for that property we purchased in December. That was paid off directly from the proceeds. So everything has come in since then. I just wanted to point out that there's a new line in there now. When you look at the Franson Bank and Trust, that looks like it's way up. It's because all of our tax revenue came in, and we have subsequently paid out the settlements to the other taxing entities since then. So that has come down now too. I guess the other thing I'd point out, interest is, we're still doing very well on interest, almost $100,000 in July. But going down to ARPA, we did pay out a $400,000 internet to one of the companies. And then I also did the settlement between the courthouse construction and what the county board had committed to that. And also the $191,000 shift that we did between the last issue proceeds and the ARPA. So that's actually down to under 300,000 now as of today. Any questions on that?
Mike, Chairman,
Yes.
Mike, what is the interest rate we're getting at Franson right now?
Franson, I think, is a little over 4.25, but let me double check. It's not as high as our investments.
It's 4.75, Mike.
Okay. And the other ones are getting a little over 5, so it's actually pretty good for a local bank.
Right here.
And the gap that they do retain keeps us from having monthly bank fees. They kind of pay those out of that. All right, moving on to the ambulance billing. That is all the same. The one thing I added is that percentage of anything over 120 days. So that's a new column on this aging report. You can see our total for July is up a little from June. The percent current went down just a little bit, but it was still higher than any other previous month. But you can see that there was good movement on anything over 120 days. That's down from 8% from 3 months ago. So we're making very good progress that way. At the end, I'll show you the actual aging report, what is in there, and that'll kind of help us out with some of the questions we had last month. Starting to look at the calls per month. I've mentioned before that now that we've been with LifeQuest, well, it's been about 18 months now. So we're starting to see a shift of not just LifeQuest versus a previous company, but now that's getting kind of blended together. So the calls are virtually unchanged from the previous 12-month period, still down from where we were before, but we've discussed that at length before. The build per month is up about 25,000 from the previous 12-month period, not quite to where it had been before, but we're again making good progress. Really good progress on the amount collected per month. So our billings are down, but we're starting to close that gap from not the last 12 months, but the 2 prior 12-month periods where we're getting closer to what we had been billing out or collecting before. So that's all good movement. And the percentage is still running strong. We're basically on par with 2 and 3 years prior to this year. So, with it, and we've talked about all this, the change of leadership or ownership at the previous company, we saw a decline in what we were collecting, that we've kind of made that percentage gap back up again now. The dollars billed and collected per call, our billed amount is at an all-time high and our collections per call are at an all-time high. So those numbers are good, even though our calls are still down a little. We're doing a good job billing and collecting. Looking at the income statement for the ambulance through July, they're showing a profit of over $100,000. So that's all good. But they basically broke even in 2022. Yes. Did I hear a question? Or was that outside? Okay. So then this new slide at the end here is the aging summary, and it shows a breakdown of the payer types. Well, actually all the payer types, not a breakdown of it. It's not grouped. The question was last month on how much maybe Medicare is out there that we're not getting collected on, or Medicaid, and there's not a lot of that. I guess the one thing I'd like to point out is anything that says Latitude, that is their LifeQuest collection agency that they turn things over to. So there's a lot of Latitude. There's Export to, anything that says LAT is also going to Latitude. And tying this back to the actual aging report, the first slide. Their collection agency is doing a good job of getting those because we're not seeing, now that we've been with them over 12 months now, 12 months plus 120 days, what I'm not seeing is a big buildup of that number. So I think they're doing a very good job of getting those ones even that get to the point of collections.
And what are we paying them? Is it a percentage or how does that work?
It's a percentage, yeah.
Chairman,
Yes.
Mike, since we've improved so much on our collections, how's this going to affect the 24 budget? Because I know the county had supplemented ambulance for years. What does that look like?
We're still going to have to supplement them pretty much at the same level, which I'll get into later when we start talking about budget. The one thing I did ask of John, he had submitted a budget and he had kept collections the same. I asked if I could adjust that because we haven't been hitting that number and we're not likely to next year either. So all of that didn't really affect the bottom line, but our levy is flat instead of we've seen increases over the past several years. So that's good news.
I think you have one slide in there that kind of talks about the percent collected. So maybe we're talking like maybe a 5% improvement, or what do you think from what the old?
Well,
billing
from
company?
the end of the previous one, it's more like 10.
10, okay.
And not 10%, 10 points, which is actually about 25% of improvement over what we were at.
Good.
Chairman,
Yeah.
Mike, isn't the Medicare, Medicaid payable rates going to go up though to a larger amount next year in the previous years?
That I'm unaware of. Does anybody know that? That would be nice because it's a low reimbursement rate, I know. All right, well, then I'm going to move into a preliminary 2024 budget. Some of the highlights, new construction was up again. That just beat last year's. I think last year was 1.17. This year it's 1.186. It equates to about $122,500. That is the highest level in 14 years that I have record of. I'm assuming it's probably even longer than that, but that's what I have numbers back to. In speaking with departments, not just budget time, but throughout the year, we've seen a fair amount of movement. And some of that was people wanted to change departments. Some of it was doing things more efficiently. So we're going to see some of that. And one thing that we did do is we did not replace the surveyor who retired. We've shifted some duties around, and also we will, when it comes to a heavy time of surveying, we'll look to contract some of that out. So we're still carrying the position, but the budget has changed because of that. And
When we did that, didn't we compensate the other people some?
we did, yep. And then we've settled now with the union. You guys are aware of that. What's proposed in this budget with non-union staff is a 2% increase in January and then a 1% in July. And then beyond that, anyone who is eligible for a step increase, those are granted. That is 1.125 or 1.25% beyond the 2 and the 1. So, Sawyer County's fallen behind a little bit on salaries, where this helps to get us a little closer, or at least stay on par with where we were. All of that is built into the budget and built in by department. I think that's a little bit of a change from in previous years. I think departments were held tight. All of the increases were budgeted in a contingency fund. I like to budget where it's going to be. It's a lot easier to track. It's easier for department heads to look at and see where they actually are. So that's all included in department line budgets. Health insurance is a major cost of ours. I did a 5% increase. When I get to department by department, I'll say, this is just a normal change. You're gonna say, well, that dollar amount doesn't look normal. Well, our family plan costs the county about $30,000. So if a spouse maybe had carried insurance for a county employee, now they switch jobs, don't have it. If that county employee goes on our insurance, that's a $30,000 addition, and vice versa. Some people drop it because their spouse now carries it. So that can make a big change on a budget line item when you look at a department, but it is just still normal staffing. So some of those changes I will point out to when we get to them. Sales tax revenue is still growing. We've talked about that. Last year was budgeted at 2.6. I've increased that to 2.8. Still like to leave a little buffer in case we don't hit it. And one thing Andy's brought up, which is a really good idea, is anytime we do exceed that amount, maybe put that in a set aside fund balance for years when sales tax doesn't hit our budgeted amount. So that would be a restricted sales tax then. And we're seeing great returns on our investments now. From what I hear, they're talking about maybe one more boost in interest rates, but then most people are thinking that's going to start ratcheting down at the end of this year, into 24 for sure. So I did budget a lot more than we had budgeted this year, but not what we're going to hit this year. So that it's, again, we like to budget revenues conservative and liberals expenses a little more liberally. This next slide shows what we can exempt from the levy limit calculation. Bridge and culvert construction and repair, which we do, we utilize that one. Countywide EMS, we utilize. Payments to public libraries, we utilize, and payments to general obligation debt. We utilize those four. Two that we have not that are available to us, which we are not proposing in this budget, are the property and casualty insurance premiums and court-ordered placements. So those are things we could use. They're in our toolbox later on. We don't need to use them at this point, so we're not recommending them in this budget. Requests that came out of the budget process from departments, Extension is looking for some more support. Currently, what we have is a 10% of another support person is dedicated to Extension. They would like a little more than that. They proposed a budget that increases their ask by $32,500. That would be to add some support staff to be shared among, I believe, is it 5 counties, Andy? 4 or 5? 4. The court is asking for a 0.6 FTE for additional support staff. Beyond that, we did another one of our shifts was to add a second judicial assistant. The person who took that came from a county position, which we are not replacing. We're shifting some duties. Some of those would actually go to the 2 judicial assistants. Is that correct, Andy? In a roundabout way, maybe?
Yeah, so essentially our heads, the registrar of probate, juvenile court clerk position of full-time has been eliminated. And that became the second judicial assistant. And then part of those duties went with the job. And we added the halftime or 60% position in the court, the registrar of probate. There was, as you see, there's a request for another full-time position to the court. It's part of the budget.
And then beyond that,
Is the second judge at any it's still pretty slow. I mean, they're having the calendar is still balancing out. Like the hearings are being reassigned to the second judge. Just when we're doing that this week, we're not going to have that calendar fully transitioned until the end of the year. We were earlier told the second judge.
Folks, could we just get your mics on for that?
You were earlier told that a second judge should decrease the number of inmates. We still feel that way?
Yes, I think, well, we were already down, but the idea would be that we'd have, I can't remember the percentage, but 60% of our inmates are pre-trial. They're waiting to go through the system. So that number should start to come down. What might happen though is that because they'll be moving to trial sooner, they'll have less time served, because a lot of times they go to trial and whatever their conviction is, they get credit for time served. That might flip from being pre-trial to being incarcerated for whatever, however length of conviction they have. So I'm not going to promise that you're going to see the numbers come down. It's just that they might
Kind of stays the same.
could stay the same, but everything should move through quicker. People should get to trial sooner.
Oftentimes the delay is the attorneys, not the judge.
Well, that's what I was going to say. A lot of times the other bottleneck is public defenders.
Yeah.
And having people get represented.
And the other thing I want to mention is we are getting another over $50,000 because of the second courthouse, and the budget we're presenting that would cover the cost of the expanded staff. So that has always been a question: is the second courthouse going to cost us more money? And
Budget goes up, it's not costing us.
correct, it's net neutral then. At this point, if we stick to the 0.6, because of the other adjustment we made in shifting around.
And that's theory, because the number of trials shouldn't increase. Because the other thing that money covers is lawyer appointments, witness fees. But
Right.
in theory, we shouldn't have more cases. Unless we have more crime, that's one case.
But that wouldn't be as a result of the second courthouse.
Mr. Schleter.
The 50,000 you referred to. That came from the state.
Yep.
And was designated to go where?
Courthouse. It's a reimbursement for courthouse costs.
Court,
Court.
yeah,
You get
Court.
50,000 per judge.
courtroom.
Okay. 50,000 per judge,
For court.
per court. And that's what we're spending it on,
Mhm.
because it can't be spent on anything else.
Well, theoretically, it would free up money for something else if we're getting more reimbursement through the court system that covers the expenses. But we're spending it because we will have to add some, that 0.6 FTE.
Well, we weren't supposed to, the court department was not supposed to cost us any more than it had in the past.
Well, net, it's not with this proposal.
Yeah, but the $50,000 that the state is sending is being spent on the court
Yeah.
system.
That's why I say net. The expenses are up, but the revenue's up. The net is the same.
Okay,
Question. The deputy that's in the courtroom himself. Do we have a deputy in there all the time or just when needed? How's that work?
The best answer I can give you, I wouldn't say all the time, but the court security staff work that out with the judges.
Okay.
And they've had, I was talking to the sheriff about that, and they've met with the judges and given our current staffing to make sure that they're in the courtroom when they're needed. And I know there was some concern about that, but one thing the sheriff's department is doing is one of their court security is also considered a Huber. But really right now we don't have any Huber, so we'll be able to spend more time on court security. In long term, we've talked about other solutions for a Huber officer than having court security do it.
Andy, do we have any figure on the amount of time the judges are spending out of the county? Now that we have two judges, the state takes away our surplus and send them somewhere else.
Not
We
yet.
haven't gained
That's,
an
I
awful
mean,
lot.
last week's public safety meeting that came up about the difficulty the clerk of courts office is having with staffing courtrooms, because we don't have two courtrooms, we have three still. But it's gonna, and I'm we don't have good information yet because it's still, we're only a month into this. But what should happen is all of our judges will start being assigned and going out of county. That's slowly going to start to happen. At the same time, though, all the out of county judges that we did have coming in and taking up a courtroom should start to go down because we have 2 judges, so they should be able to take on more cases. But that's going to take to the end of the year to balance out those calendars for that to happen. So hopefully, just in talking with the judicial assistant staff, when they schedule the courtrooms, they're really going to work to only have 2 courtrooms going at any one time, not 3. We've had a couple instances in the last month where all 3 were in use at the same time because of our judges and out of county judges. But as that calendar gets balanced out and we move people that have the backlog of cases through, they're optimistic that they'll be able to schedule it a lot of times for just 1 courtroom going, but just no more than 2 going. And that 3rd courtroom is there for, yeah. But this is like a work in progress. And even right now today, we have not filled. I mean, we had the position vacated in the clerk of court because of one individual taking the judicial assistant position. That we've done interviews, but don't have that filled yet. Nor do we have the 0.6 position that we created to add into that office. So we're essentially down 1.6, and we're going to have a judicial assistant position open for a little while due to a FMLA issue. So, I mean, people are stretching. I'll say, I mean, everybody's trying to make this work, but we don't have all the staff in place and won't have them in place for a little while here. We did bring in on an LTE basis for the clerk of court, former clerk of court from Bayfield County that knows register and probate. So we did create an LTE position, and that person's here, I think, 20 hours a week helping with the transition. And they've been helping with, transitioning the juvenile clerk duties to the JAs and getting register and probate up and running in the clerk of court's office.
Thank you.
And one last comment. I know you were told and sold on the idea that there would be no additional staffing or cost for having a 2nd courtroom. And we're really trying to hold to that, but I think somebody snowballed you.
Go ahead, Mike. Thank you.
All right, so then I'm going to move on to the fund balance draw as requested. So this is including all the requests inside and outside the county. And then a couple of changes that we will likely recommend. So the Senior Resource Center is requesting just under $230,000. What we would recommend is $210,000, which would be a $10,000 increase over 23. So they're asking for a really large one. We're giving them what we feel is that's 5%. And we recognize that food costs have gone up. So that's why we're doing that, kind of meeting them in the middle. That would be a savings of about $20,000. Nemacolin Transit has requested a big increase again, up to 180. We would recommend a $5,000 increase to 160. So that would save $20,000. Andy's already been in discussions with extension, and they have a new solution since their budget was submitted, and that will save about $17,500. Little change in how they would do the support staff. These last 2 are different from years past. So HHS, for the last few years, we've given we've budgeted a big transfer to them. And it's basically due to conservatively anticipated costs of placements. They have a fund balance of almost $2 million now because with the 21 surplus, the county transferred $1.3 million from the general fund to HHS. In 2022, these are unaudited figures, but they had a net income of about $500,000, and they had a little bit of a fund balance prior to that. So they're almost up to $2 million. So what I'm proposing is that we would reduce that transfer from, I think it was almost 1.7 for 23 down to $600,000. And then we would take that remaining 747 out of their fund balance. Again, it's not necessarily going to get spent. They like to budget in case this happens with placements. So that would be a change. Even if they had to spend the $747,000, they would still have 1.25 or so in their fund balance, so they would be safe. Then with highway was a lot of work this year. But we're getting a better handle on it. In the past, Gary present a budget numbers, a lot of lump sums because they have to report to the state way different than we have to budget in New World. So Mike Keefe before me and me last year basically try to take Gary's budget and make it make sense in the New World. Well, we consulted with Washburn County this year, who has both New World and chems. So we do things very similarly. So Lisa from Washburn County, I have to give a ton of props to because she helped us a lot. She basically took the information on salaries and benefits for 24 that I gave her, along with budget history stuff between chems and New World from previous years, and kind of came up with a budget for us for this year that was very easy for me to transition in the New World. So we budgeted differently. What it shows is that we've probably been budgeting a deficit in years past. So this is more of a realistic budget, we feel. They also have a fund balance of just under $700,000. So again, we would kind of split the deficit from the request between a transfer from general fund and their own fund balance. And John is new, we're new at maybe understanding their budget a little more. So our recommendation is that we allow this deficit of $344,000 in their budget, and then use this year for John to really get a handle on how things work and if that's realistic or not. So all those adjustments come to almost $1 million. So we would propose a fund balance. Actually, we're proposing a fund balance drop $750,000, which would give us a buffer. But again, that's down from almost 1.7 in 2023. I would not anticipate using any of the $600,000 to HHS. There's a good chance we would need the actual transfer of $150,000 to highway. When we closed out the books for highway for 22, we're actually probably going to have to do a transfer of about $350,000 out of our surplus from 22. Surplus looks like it's about $1 million, so the net would be about $650,000. So any questions on any of those adjustments we're looking at?
Chairman, I got a question. So Mike, we've never used the opportunity to go outside the levy limits for out of county placements. Is that correct? And when is the time, if we ever had to use that, would we have time the following year to borrow money or put it outside the levy limits to pay back on the previous year?
And that's exactly how I would recommend doing it. Because right now we haven't had to do it. We've been budgeting for it for years, but we haven't had to dip into that. If that happened, then yes, I would recommend, because we can't control the placements if they do happen. If we deficit spend, then that's, we'll look at the budget as a whole at that point, but that would be where we would likely recommend, okay, let's take advantage of this at this point. We're always going to recognize that does go on the tax levy. So if there's any other way we can do it, we would explore that first, but that would be an opportunity for us.
Light reflection is terrible.
All right, so these are the partner organization requests, the ones that are outside of the county. The library ones pretty much held what they were prior. Northern Waters Library Services asking for a little increase. Our in-county ones, both Weiss and Winter, didn't have an increase in their request. And
Weiss
then
didn't have any increase.
They did not. So
Thank you.
they kept it at 200,000. LCO actually, they haven't ever requested above their circulation. Their circulation went down. So their request is actually $8,000 less than last year.
Question, did you correspond with somebody out at the LCO library?
Not other than receiving their request.
Okay, they sent a request.
Yep.
Good enough, thank you.
And then the outside libraries are up a little bit from last year. Senior Resource Center, I kind of mentioned this already. They did increase their request from what we gave them last year. I'm recommending meeting them in the middle a little bit and increasing theirs $10,000. Nemacolin Transit, the same thing, increasing theirs 5,000. They're healthy. You know, all these outside organizations give us their income statement, balance sheet. You know, they're in good shape. So I'd recommend a little bit of an increase, but not what they're asking for. Hayward Lakes kept theirs the same at $50,000. Not recommending a change there. Northwest Regional Planning actually went down a little bit. Sawyer County Fair, it looks like it went down, but they also have a $10,000 CIP. So their total funding is up $3,000, but the amount from the general fund will be down a little. And then the Economic Development Corp asked for another $5,000. So then with the adjustments, the increase will be about $7,000 over 2023, which is pretty moderate on 850,000, less than 1%.
What did we give Weiss? What were they budgeted for last year?
They requested 210, we gave them 200.
200, and this
Yep.
year they're asking 200, we're recommending 160.
No, that's
Oh,
yeah,
the
that was
formula
the formula.
suggestions
their
160.
formula was actually up over last year because I believe it was $122,000
Okay.
last year.
You're right, I remember now. Thank you.
And then a little more detail on the Senior Resource Center. Keep it up there, Lynn, at that previous one. So we have a flow through grant that goes right to them for transportation. That remains unchanged. That's just under $80,000. So the actual levy request would be, they're requesting about 150. We would do the 131.11, which is up from 121.11 last year.
Mike, could you tell me on the LCO or Sawyer County LCO EDC, what the additional $5,000 request was for and why you are okay with that?
I would have to look up what they're actually spending that difference on.
I just have a meeting today and I'd like to know why they asked
I
that.
can, if you want to come in my office afterwards, we can look
Okay.
at that together.
All right, thank you.
The request is just, there was no additional specified project. It's just increasing the general support for the EDC by 5, as far as their request.
Split with LCO, there's a request with, I know that it's not an even, so
Okay.
before it was 25-15. So does that mean that LCO will be asked for more? I'm just worried about,
That I don't know.
yeah, and like then the policy is that they have to fundraise, and so the things I just want to make sure that I'm correct on why they're asking for that additional when there's not a director right now.
Right. And maybe if I don't think I've shared this with Mike, but potentially we could look at it as 25-5. 25 is our general support, and then we budget 5,000 for specific projects that they might want to do that they can approach us for.
Turn your light on, Dan.
It's on now, right?
Now it is. Now we can see you.
Okay. When you look at the books, especially for the Hayward Lakes Visitors Bureau, what is their fund balance? How much do they have? Did they make?
They're in a healthy spot too.
How healthy?
I don't know their fund balance offhand. If you wanted to come too, I could look that up for you.
I would like to see that because several years ago, we voted and agreed to give them the 50,000, but it was going to be for 1 year because they were beginning to receive the room tax revenue. And since then, room tax revenue probably has increased, just going by everything happening in Hayward in the summertime and the winter. I really question whether they need that 50,000. I'd like to
Let's
see
look at
some,
that after. the
I'd like to
meeting.
see some justification for it. And I can't do it right after this because I have another meeting.
Okay, after that.
I have another meeting.
Oh,
I'll catch you sometime.
yeah, come in someday.
Okay.
All right, then moving on to preliminary revenues. And I have to give, this is something I discovered yesterday going through stuff. I have to qualify these numbers. I assume these categories were by the actual number in our books. This actually pulls from a classification, which doesn't necessarily tie to the number. So some of these categories maybe aren't quite right. Like taxes is high, but it includes some of the fees that we charge, but not all. And then the other one, that the miscellaneous is really high. And what the main ones in miscellaneous are interest income, which I am budgeting way more than I budgeted this year. And then the other one is indirect costs, which are we get that study done that figures out all of our central office costs and then allocates them out to the different departments. And the reason we do that is some of the departments can use those costs to increase their grant funding. So that's why we do that. And that's up a little bit, but the number I can come up with is about 1.6 million. So now I have to really dig in and see what I really have to go account by account to see where it's classified and why it's pulling into that. But the total revenue number is right. And it's down from last year. And the reason it's down is it's less of a transfer, almost $1 million less transfer from general fund, which is included as a revenue. So that's why that number is down. Any questions on that? We'll go through detail later.
Chairman, where does the interest on our investments, what does that fall under?
That goes under miscellaneous.
Oh, miscellaneous, okay.
Moving on to expenditures. Again, it looks like general fund is going down just because of the drop from fund balance in the budget is less. That's why that's going down. Health and Human Services has a little bit of an increase. Highway is a little bit more of an increase, but again, we're basing that on more realistic budgeting versus what we've been spending over the past few years versus what the budget had been in the past. Our debt service repayment is going up a little bit now as we fully have the $4 million note issue on there. Capital is down a lot, but obviously we're wrapping up the construction on the courthouse. That's the reason that's going down. What would still be in there would be the CIP and the capital for ambulance primarily. And then the other one, you can see that was down, went up, came down again. The reason it was up so high in 23 was the budget for ARPA. And by the end of this year, ARPA will pretty much be expended. The only thing I don't know about is the helicopter pad at Draper. So I've budgeted that for 24.
Yep. They
not
just
knowing.
actually sent an email yesterday saying that they're on track. They've got their bids and it's on budget and be constructed yet this fall, I believe.
Okay. So then that could be a change where I would just eliminate that from the budget altogether. And that would be assuming the other internet stuff gets done too. I think we have about $200,000 left in contracts for that. Can you drag the who's on over. There we go, that works too. So this is looking at the property tax levy. You can see the general fund tax levies, real moderate increase of 0.6. Ambulance, like I said, is pretty flat, 0.88. Health and Human Services, pretty flat. The recreation officer would actually go down. Conservation will stay the same. And again, this is based on request, so I'm carrying the full 180 request from Nemocoggan Transit at 180, so that would be a 16% increase. Debt service, like I mentioned, is going up. That would be a 12% increase. The ambulance CIP, the cost of new ambulances have gone up, so that is up about 5%. The highway levy is up to account for the increase in the budget. So the overall county levy would go up about 2.7. There are state charges on top of that, which makes it an increase of about 2.75. I just got that state charges this week. I need to dig in exactly to see what those are. It wasn't much last year, it's a little more this year. Our property valuation went up a lot, about 19%. So our tax rate would go from 309 down to 2.68, which is good news. That looks really good. The bad news is most of the valuation increase is just residential appreciation. There has been a fair amount of new construction. Commercial real estate valuation didn't go up a lot, so it mostly is on homeowners. The other issue with how we're growing so fast, that really affects our net new construction, because we have to overcome that valuation increase before we get any new money, really. So that's something Andy's been talking with some people about, to keep that in mind for counties like us that are property rich, that we really get penalized for that when it comes to any new money. Shared revenue is tied to an index. Net new construction is not. We get basically a flat dollar amount, but it's actually regress dollar amount, because when the property value goes up, even if we kept the same dollar amount of net new construction, our net new construction percentage will go down because of the increase in the overall valuation. That was not a very good explanation.
Mine might not be any better because it's not exact math, but essentially next year or this year, we're gonna need to have a 19% increase in net new construction to have the same increase
Correct. That's a better way to say it.
in next year's budget.
To maintain our 1.186, we would
Right.
have to increase that by 18.55 to even break even.
Which in a rural area is a lot of net new construction.
Yeah.
There's not, hardly even enough builders to go around to get to that point.
Andy, where would the money come from then if we do not hit that net new construction number?
Well, I mean, we're talking about, 1 point,
$122,000
Thank
out of
you.
$35 million budget. So it's not a huge
Got it.
number, but everything helps.
yeah, exactly.
It helps to cover the increase in insurance premiums if we have any. Any other questions on the levy? This is really good news, by the way. We've had 2 years in a row of over $1 million increase in the levy, so to have a pretty moderate one is nice. And then this last slide, or next slide, is just a tax rate history. So we're back to where we were in 2012, a little under. So it's the lowest tax rate in the last 13 years. And it's gone down for 4 years in a row. So that's all good news. Especially in the middle of adding debt, to have your levy rate go down is pretty remarkable. Any questions on that?
Mike, Chairman. Mike, are there any variables out there that maybe you foresee but you can't budget for things that we're concerned about? Like I keep thinking this subcommittee we made on these tourist rooming houses, there's going to be license fees there. There's going to be more inspection, more enforcement. Is that going to play a role at all in the new budget?
Well, if we had to have staff, add staff to do that, it would. If we added fees, hopefully that would offset a lot of the.
That's what I'm
increased
thinking.
staff costs.
With over 500 tourist rooming houses now, that I don't know how the staff we have is going to keep up with all of that they're proposing.
Correct. And I do have contingency built into the budget for things like that, or, you know, I mentioned insurance changes if something happens mid-year where, well, for instance, my son moved up here, he no longer has insurance. I had to go to a family plan to add him on. That's the cost to the county. So if that happens mid-year, that's why I have that contingency. But again, it can happen the other way too, where a spouse can pick up insurance and somebody drops. So they do tend to kind of even out over the course of a year. But for something like that, yes, we do have contingency built in. And even beyond that, as the budget sits right now, we've got a surplus showing of about $48,000. And then I showed you $57,000 of changes we would recommend prior to the final admin budget recommendation. So we do have a $100,000 buffer. I do know that there's an increased cost that's going to be about $35,000 that I don't have a final number for, so that'll take up about a third of that, but we would have some room for that.
Good question.
Just a comment. Tweet, in your example, because we were performing this duty for the state, we can increase our income accordingly. So we definitely have the ability to increase the fees. If it's going to cost us more, we need to charge more. So that should be a wash, if nothing else. Just wanted to make aware.
And that has been discussed. And it really depends on what the outcome of the rooming house committee is and what the board adopts, if anything, out of that, to the level of management or enforcement that we'll need to do. And that's come up that we are between tourist rooming houses and even in zoning, we're probably not meeting or getting to the enough enforcement actions. But on that same side, just expect that if you significantly raise fees, which we would probably have to do, that you'll have the counter opinion that, are we charging excessive fees? But we definitely would first propose to raise the fees enough to cover the expense of that operation.
All right, and then moving on to more of a.
Actually, if people are going to complain about excessive fees, that might be a positive, because then they might not have so many Airbnbs and dwellings of this sort, and 3 in a row, which are difficult to manage. So
I know we're getting close to that 10 o'clock hour here, so I will highlight things, basically what I have notes for. And I've said some of this already, but I did increase sales tax from 2.6 to 2.8. The shared revenue, the new numbers budgeted in there, you've all heard by now that was increased. We were in the top 5% increase, but probably bottom $5 amount increase in shared revenue. But I guess it looks good on paper, and it does help. I never am gonna knock any new money or increase in money. County forest stumpage, we've typically budgeted 1.85 for that, and that I know is their department's goal. But we do pay out 10% to the township. So what I've budgeted is actually the net of that 10%. Because I feel that in the past we've probably over budgeted that. I mentioned the interest. I'm not budgeting what we're going to make this year, but it's a big increase over what was budgeted. Already mentioned that transfer from debt service we're not going to do. I mentioned the decrease in the prior year's fund balance transfer. So that kind of is the revenue side. Unless there are any questions, I will. Andy.
Comment to make it to the committee. So we are budgeting more on interest income. And right now, all of our investments are in floating rate
Correct.
accounts. You know, and that's going to be the discussion with the treasurer and Mike and the committee, is if we were to lock in some things before rates start to go down, we would be guaranteed to get at least 500,000 because we could lock into a
A CD.
24-month CD or 12-month CD and make sure we get that much interest. So we're watching that, and that will be a discussion as things start to change there. At least to hedge our risk a little bit, but not having it all in floating rate accounts.
Mhm.
Mr. Slater.
Yeah, the amount of money that is being allocated to the to the townships for the what did you call that?
Stumpage.
For stumpage, okay. Has that changed much over the years?
I don't believe the percentage, the dollar amount can fluctuate according to what we bring in, but not the percentage. I believe that's a statute, isn't it?
There's a statute to
That we have to pay that out,
what percentage though?
10%. What it's intended for is if a township was very heavy on county forest land, they wouldn't have much to tax. So this is supposed to help them a little with that.
Okay, but I
Kind
didn't
of like a
realize
tax
the
in lieu
10%
of
is,
tax.
Yeah.
10% is static, the dollar amount can change.
thank you, that helps.
The only other one I would mention, I guess, is on the next page, ambulance. So that budget is down, but we have not hit that number in previous years, so that's why. And I budgeted the expenses according to where I really think we're going to hit, and then match the income according to that. And like I showed you earlier, the tax levy is virtually flat for that after a couple years of really large increases. And then most of these, I've got normal raises in health insurance costs. Normal raises are anything within the 2% January 1, 1% July 1, and any steps that are granted. And then I have notes for anything above that. Circuit court is all the normal stuff plus that 0.60 FTE that they requested that we are recommending. I've got for finance, I switched to family plan. There's treasurer, we had some turnover there, and that came with some increased costs in insurance plans. Someone going from what we weren't paying to a family plan. Surveyor, the costs are down quite a bit. That's because, as I mentioned earlier, we did not rehire that surveyor. We kind of spread across some duties to different departments. Extension is up because of that additional staff they requested. Zoning is up. A couple of those, it's the normal stuff plus the additional insurance plan we have in there. And then also we have a grant funded part-time position that's been scanning old records and updating them to digital. And that actually started in this year. So that's budgeted in there now where it hadn't been before. As you can see, if you look at the very first column, we've been going over budget. That's because of the health insurance. In forestry, we actually had somebody drop off a plan or reduce a plan, so that went down a little. And maintenance, we had some turnover there, and our insurance costs are up because of that, more family plans. Sheriff's Department, I do want to highlight that one a little bit. It looks like it's a very minimal increase. The reason for that is, I came right in the budget process last year. I keep learning and learning. Well, there were 2 deputies that I had budgeted in that department last year that actually are in a different department, in a different fund. So I knew that now this year. So that's why that didn't go up as much, because there's 2 fewer FTEs in there that are they were budgeted both last year, both in the other fund, both in Fund 100. So my apologies for that, but now that I know, I budgeted differently. Airport went up a little bit. That's because of snow removal. We have gone over budget pretty regularly on that, so we increased the budget for that. And Veterans Administration. I actually talked with Gary yesterday. I stopped over there, but we had already set the budget and talking with him before, but he's swamped over there. And so we had a halftime person that was full-time, but halftime in ADRC, halftime in veterans. We're recommending moving that to full-time in veterans. So that's why there's a little increase there. And then the overall is looking like it's going down again. That's because we're reducing our transfer to special funds with HHS kind of picking up from their own fund balance. The overall there, you can see that $48,000 surplus that I've mentioned, that's as we stand right now. Changes would make it over 100, but then we'd be reduced by that $35,000 increase we're going to have in, I think it's a phone charge at the sheriff's department. Any questions on general fund at all? Then moving on to HHS, really just moderate increase there, normal stuff. And then highway, again, I've talked about this already. It's more realistic budget, hopefully, than what we've seen in the past. And then the grand total is showing a deficit of about $33,000. Actually, all of that is because of that $40,000 in ARPA money that I have budgeted against no revenue. So if I do move that, because it sounds like that's going to happen this year, then we would be at pretty much a net zero overall. The smaller funds in the 200s, a lot of those carry their own fund balance, so they aren't necessarily net zero each year. That's why it's never going to be a 0-0 unless I budgeted a draw or a contribution to each year as well. Any questions on any of that?
ARPA funds for Draper. The board members doing the work. How do we handle that? Just, I'm telling you, just to watch. That's what I'm saying.
We have to get, they'll have to get us the copy of the invoice supposed to reverse. That's our problem. They just emailed an update to us. I had to get, and then that was coincidentally said we were on track and close to the projected budget.
Anybody else have any questions? Thank you, Mike. Nice job.
I guess I have a question. Just to clarify, to make sure as we go ahead and continue on this, Mike's put together the preliminary look. This is largely what we would call the department budget.
Correct. Yeah.
We have to go through it and, I don't know, I guess I'd call this is like the chainsaw version of the log carving. Now we're going to go in with chisels and knives and refine it. There are some things that have come up within the last week that we'll have to resolve, and then we give you an administration budget. I want to, we'll tell you some things that are not included. Like, there was a request from Waldo. I consider the request from the town of Edgewater about ambulance to be an official request. We went down to talk to them Tuesday night, and they're essentially requesting that we pay their fees to the Four Corners. There's other position requests. We'll summarize which of those have been included and excluded. And I haven't talked to Waldo. I told Edgewater that I didn't intend to put that request into the budget, that so you'd expect that you might hear from them. But how do you want to, we want to go about this the same way we did last year, or do you want to revisit department budgets at a separate meeting? Or because now Mike will make a presentation at the September County Board meeting, kind of similar to this one, and it gets published in a second week in October.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure we're on the same page on process, getting us to the finish line. And I point out those couple of things I don't, I mean, if you need to know that the request was made and that we didn't include it and have the option to add it in if you want. I don't know of any others that outside of the ones, Mike summarized the ones we normally fund and where we're at with those. Then there's the other ones that aren't usual requests.
You know, let's follow the same procedure we did last year.
Yeah.
But it's nice to know which ones requested that didn't get funded. That's important to know. Them are taxpayers also.
Okay.
Yeah, and Andy, I think the Ms. Hessel and Mr. Schleter brought up some good points about we need to look what was left over last year in some of these budgets. Like he mentioned Hayward Lakes and Ms. Hessel mentioned economic development.
And I'll not, Mike wants to disagree. I'm not gonna speak for him, but I know from my perspective, the Hayward Lakes one specifically, their budgets are healthy. They've gotten a tremendous increase in room tax dollars the last, probably not anything new this year, but prior to that, as those townships adopted room tax, they're getting a percentage of those. Their budget has increased significantly. I'm going off the atmosphere of the board since I've been here and reading the minutes of the meeting years before that when it was downsized, the board has put it back in, and so we're leaving it in when we give it to you.
I think they're all a trickle effect, and when we can support them and then they go out and get us the further tax dollars, I think that's applauded. So I think it's a trickle effect. Like we have to give them money, like all of the entities, in order for us to get money. So I applaud all of the efforts. I just think some of them we have to watch, but otherwise I think it should be a county applauded effort to bring tourism here, to bring economic development here, to bring people that love the fair here. I mean, all of those things, that's what our goal is to have people and have Sawyer County thrive.
Get more? Future agenda items, will you bring the budget back? Does anybody have anything that specifically want brought forward? We'll put together something. Don't need one. Meeting adjourned. Thank you. Thank you. About